L'chaim, for those that are drinking the coffee with me. What an incredible week. It's going by so fast. Another opportunity, another week, another chance to really try to bring out what's on the inside. As we head into the weekend, we got a minute to breathe, a minute to pause, a minute to reflect. That's really the goal of the weekend. It's really the goal of Shabbat. Depending on whatever level of your interest, observance, religion, that's not really what we're talking about here. It's really a question. What Shabbat brings to the world is this idea of reflection. This idea of taking a breath, realizing that there's more in this world than just me. There's a God that created the place, and I'm a player in it. And what that brings to me when I think that way is a certain level of visibility. This whole week we've been talking about the concept of how to overcome challenge, of how to do it in a way where we are identifying that challenge is actually bringing out a piece of me, that I grow, I evolve from living through the prism, through the perspective of someone who's trying to survive, which is the default setting. That's what I have. Now, this is why it's so critical, is that if the prism in which you see the world is survival, that's the default. So that means that we haven't upgraded who we were since we were born. We're still 6. We're just 6 with different level problems. So it's not school, it's work. It's not friends, it's family, right? All that's happened from 13, 14, 15 to 30, 40, 50 is I've upgraded my issues, and so the issues feel harder. You ever hear your kid complaining that it's so hard they're in school, and you're like, for real? Like, really? And like, you don't say it because you don't make them feel bad, but you're thinking like, relax. It doesn't really matter. I've got big issues. I got to pay a mortgage. We're dealing with this bigger problem. And they're bigger problems, so to speak. But the prism in which you're seeing the problems, the perspective in which we're looking, we're still in survival. We're still in that same world of comfort, of wanting everything just be status quo, of looking for the materialism in everything. It evolved a little bit. It wasn't exactly 15. But the process of challenge, the process of hopefully what we bring on ourselves in challenge. And what I'm saying is, I don't believe you can get it any other way. I don't believe that. The only hope is that we create our own challenges, and we don't have challenges given to us. But I don't know how one brings out the best in themselves if they're not constantly pushing themselves. I don't think you can be a Navy SEAL without training. I don't think you can be a professional football player without going through training camp. I don't know how you do it. I don't think you could be a great at anything. I don't think you could be a great surgeon without going through the challenges of learning how to do surgery. I don't think you could be great at marriage. This is a major misconception that like marriage is about like finding the right person. Finding the right person is like step 1 of a million steps. Marriage isn't only about finding the right person. It's about finding someone that you can work with, and then working, like really working, like trying to put yourself in the perspective, in the mindset of your spouse, trying to do the things that they want, not what you want. That's hard. So when challenge becomes that in which we're avoiding, we're still in survival. But as soon as we start to see it as the pathway to the upgraded system, to the 2.0, to the world of greatness, to the world of thriving, now it takes on a different means for us. And the only way really to get there is to do it. You can think about it all day. You can listen to it all day. It's nice. It's better than not. It's not doing it, because if you remember earlier in the week, we spoke about that long road. The longest road in the world is between your head and your heart. There's a block right here where you have like, that makes sense. That makes sense. We should totally do that. Oh my God, for sure. And then it gets in here, you're like, tomorrow. The only way you can actually live with that level of challenge is if you're practicing it every day. The only way you can learn to play the violin is if the only way you can run a marathon, the only way you can do anything in life is when you are doing it a little bit every single day. So every day is a day in which a person should be taking upon themselves some measure of challenge. And to the extent in which we're still resisting that challenge, and I'm not saying incredibly difficult challenge, even a little bit of challenge, a little bit more, you go a little bit farther, you try a little bit harder. If you're not engaged in a constant diet of challenge, you're not enabling your body, your mind to develop as a human being that's coming from your infinite soul that is trying to achieve greatness. When Tolstoy, one of the greatest writers, would say, I write 10 pages every day, not for the work, but for me as the writer. What he's saying is there are lots of days in which I get up in the morning and I write 10 pages. That was his ritual. And it's killing me. But I got to do it, because if I don't fight the challenge, I'm not going to bring out the best in me as a writer. And if we're trying to always be comfortable, to avoid that challenge, to look for ways to not say those words, not do that thing, not grow in the area I need to grow in, all we're really doing is we're enabling the survival perspective to lock into our lives. So the daily challenge is what's making us. And I got these emails, and thank you so much. It means so much to me. For those that are out there that are leaving comments and writing me emails with what you've did, it like makes my day. I'm sitting in a room alone, looking at a screen, hoping that someone's out there listening. And when people are doing things, it makes it like we're a community of people trying to make a difference, trying to make our lives better. So thank you for them. Thank you for taking the time. You can always reach out for questions if you'd like. But understand that the daily dose of challenge is exactly what life is taking you towards. And the challenge and the way we deal with that, and that was really as we're going to try to wrap up the week in like just a few minutes, right? That was what we did in the beginning. We took that road together and spoke about that. And then throughout the week, what ended up happening was we started to develop this idea that there's something blocking us in the challenge. There's something that stops us along the way. There's something that gets me to stop doing what I'm doing, even though I know I should be doing it. And yesterday we started talking about this idea of time to think, time to act. It came from a story from our ancestors standing in front of the Reed Sea, leaving Egypt, and God places them there. And they're praying, and God goes, what are you doing? And Moses is like, what do you mean, what are we doing? We're praying. He's like, no, go into the sea. What God was telling us is that there are moments, you're always praying, but there are moments where you have to think about what is right and what is wrong. And I got an email from a good friend of mine who I love very much, from one of our momentum trips, who said to me, how do I know if I should go into the hospital? My kids say don't go. My wife says don't go. But I think I should go volunteer. But is it safe? Is it not safe? This is exactly the time of life where we have to figure things out. We can't go do anything we want. It's not prudent to say, like, I really want to jump off like a bridge and it'd be so cool, like I'm going to go do it. There's a balance between what I should do, if it's right or not. But there's a time to think and a time to act. And the reason why most of us don't know the difference is because we're doing both at the same time. I just gave a talk last night about the crossover. For those that are with me on the trip, you know this, the pre-Shabbat talk, the crossover. For those who want to hear the talk, just leave me a note somewhere, either on Instagram, wherever, if you're on Zoom or WhatsApp or Instagram, and I'll send you the talk. It's about the hardest move in basketball is crossing over. Crossing over requires us to go all in on wherever we are, and to understand that if I'm not all in, I'm not going to be great at the thing that I'm doing. If I'm talking to my child and half of me is thinking about an email I didn't take care of yesterday, and a piece of me is thinking about tomorrow, and I'm on my phone. I've taken my limited amount of attention and divided up into three or four things, and I am nowhere. I'm not in my emails, I'm not in the past, I'm not in the future, and I'm definitely not with my kid. If I have the trust that the world will be okay, and I'm not going to miss out, and the world doesn't revolve around me. And if my kid needs me, and I have decided that for the next 10 minutes I should spend the time with him, and I am all into that kid, and I put all of my attention on that kid, I'm going to see things about that kid, about the conversation, even if it's just a football catch, that I wouldn't have gotten if I'm sitting at a Shabbat table and I'm worried about a million things. I don't care. It could be perfect. Table set, kids around, family this, perfect. And I'm not here. I'm not here. But when I try to perfect the crossover, and it's a longer talk, but follow just as much, the crossover, which means wherever I am, I can cross over in a moment to everything that I'm doing. I cross from here, I cross from here, I cross from here. Shout out to Andy Boltax, who's with me every step of the way, dropping links to each time I say something. He just posted the article on the chat. Every single time, if I'm everywhere, I'm all there, I'm going to be much better at the thing that I'm doing. But if I'm not all there, if I'm never anywhere fully, because I don't work on the muscle of being all in, I don't feel like I am anywhere. If I am listening to somebody and I can't listen because as soon as it gets a second too less stimulating, I'm already checking my phone, I've trained myself to be nowhere. And why is it so critical for action? Because here's how it works. The reason why we don't act is because we think when we're supposed to act. And the reason why we think when we're supposed to act is because we don't spend time thinking. I'm going to give you an example. There's a concept in sports called the Squirrel Brain. I got this from a sports psychologist. I'm blanking on his name. He wrote a book called Overachievement. I loved it. Overachievement. I'm forgetting the author's name. And he speaks about him training his players. Now, a squirrel brain, he calls it, is basically squirrels don't have a lot of conscious thought, apparently. So when they're on a branch, they're not like, oh my God, I'm going to fall, I'm going to die. What am I going to tell my squirrel friends? They just see a branch. You ever see a squirrel? They just jump, 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 go, go. They don't stop to think when they're upside down on a tree. And his whole thesis is that because they're in the moment living it, they don't have the self-thought, self-doubt that's getting in the way of their natural abilities to get stuff done. But a human being gets in a moment and starts to overthink, overpanic, and then ruins it. And he gives this great example of his class that he gives. John Elliott, thank you. Andy, you're the best. John Elliott. He gives an example of his classroom he taught in Stanford, I believe. And he had a game called Throwing Keys. This is a great story. I'm going to try to talk as quickly as I can. He has these guys come in and toss keys to him. So he calls up a kid and goes, 10 feet, just throw me the keys. And he picks up off the desk keys on his desk and he throws it 10 feet to him and it hits him in the chest every time. You're throwing somebody keys. How hard is it? Then he builds a tournament of key throwing. He divides up the kids and he puts brackets and he ranks players and they start having a tournament in class for key throwing. And he finds out that the kids are like training themselves in key throwing and they're going at them and they get to it and half the guys stop throwing keys at him. Like they're missing and he's like, and he shows the kids that when I asked you to throw it, you just relied on your natural abilities to throw keys. And you didn't think. And when you don't think sometimes, your subconscious mind just takes over and you just do it. The minute you overthink it, oh my God, if I miss the key throw, I'm not going to make the next bracket. I'm going to be embarrassed. Everybody's watching me. Your brain gets in the way and you just can't deliver. So he teaches his players something called the Squirrel Brain. When you're in the game, you just play the game. You just play the game. Don't think. React. When you're on the sidelines, when you're in preparatory, when you're in post, think like crazy. And there's no better example than football, or any real professional sport, but really football. You practice like crazy. You train yourself like crazy. You review it like crazy. But when you're in that game, even the thinking isn't really conscious analysis. It's reactionary thinking. You look for, your brain sort of sees patterns and reacts. If you get in a game and you start overthinking, that 3-4 second delay, you're sacked. In many ways, that's life. We spend most of our time thinking in the moment, and that's why we're not more successful. And the reason is because we don't know how to cross over. If we don't spend the time in prep, in post of the day, of the moment, then all we're doing all day is thinking and acting at the exact same time. The reason why a professional athlete can act, the reason why a Navy SEAL could act is not because he's thinking consciously what to do in the moment. He's not. He is thinking he has conditioned himself to react a certain way in the moment so he can muster all of his attention into doing it correctly. The reason why we don't perform at that level is because we don't take that same level of time to think. So our actions and our thoughts are like muddled together. We get to the scenario and like, should I, shouldn't I, did I do it right? Am I going to fail? And the whole thing just falls apart. So here's the difference. I learned this from a great rabbi named Rabbi Noach Weinberg. He is the dean and founder of Esha Torah, an organization that I'm sure many people are familiar with. He told this to me in Hebrew, this is called cheshbon. It means an accounting. I asked him, I had 6 hours alone with the rabbi. Those who know Rabbi Noach Weinberg, he was one of the greatest rabbis of the last generation. I mean, yeah, he passed away 15 years ago, at least, I think. I had 6 hours alone with him. And in those 6 hours, I said to him, Rabbi, give me one of the secrets of great people. Like, I want to know what great people have. Not like they were born a genius. Like, give me something that like they do. And he looked at me without batting an eyelash and said, cheshbon. Cheshbon means an accounting. They don't go to bed at night without looking back in their day and asking, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How do I do that better? Thinking about what happened yesterday. Review. This is called in sports game film. You don't have one team in the NFL that doesn't finish a game and spend the next 3 to 4 days just watching the exact same game with 17 angles in in replay. For what reason? Because they're trying to learn the patterns of life. They're trying to see, when I went here, this is what happened. They're looking back at their lives and they're questioning themselves so that they can prepare for the next game. That's why they can lose themselves and go into a squirrel brain in the game. Because they're thinking about what they did yesterday, and in the prep, they're preparing for it. So their brains have spent so much time in thought that when it's time to act, it's not conscious, it's already subconscious. They've already done their thinking. Now they can just act and react. They can just live in the moment. They can bring out the bravery and the courage. Not when it's on the field, not when you're in the middle of it. You don't freeze up. I want to tell you about a story. Remind me. Hopefully next week we'll get to it. For those around, for those that will be with me on Sunday, I want to tell you about my friend. He called me yesterday. The guy who I told you yesterday had that issue. I'll tell you a little bit more. His issue was with one of his parents. He had a very difficult relationship with them. Those of you here listening to yesterday's piece, I spoke about him. My friend who froze up. And one of his parents is getting older, and he's worried that with this whole thing going on, he may not see them again. Yesterday, he went in to see them and just couldn't see his father, and he couldn't, so he left. And he called me last night as to what happened. So I'll tell you that on Sunday, with God's help. Remind me. But for now, I want to hit this point into the weekend, because this is what the weekends are for. If you want to build your action, you have to also build your time to think. That's just as important. If we wake up in the morning and we're in the world of action, right? If we wake up in the morning and as my eyes open, I'm getting emails, I'm doing things already. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm not putting myself in a place of prep. If I'm not visualizing what's coming next, if I'm not preparing myself mentally for what I'm going to do when this happens, then I've lost my chance to think. So that when I act, I don't act with that squirrel brain of doing, because I got to think on this fly. If I end my day, if I end my week, if you go into this weekend and you have no time to look back and go, what happened on Tuesday? What happened on Thursday? Why did I say that? I should have just jumped into this. I should have just done this. I shouldn't have done that. If you don't have time to look back and go, well, how come this happened? Because every time I walk in, I get triggered and I always fail. Remember, when you're in this situation and you do this thing, you're going to get triggered to fail again. So when this happens next week, don't do it. If we don't have time during our weeks and during our days, pre and post our actions, then what happens is we're not crossing over. We're thinking when we should be acting. We're acting when we should be thinking. And the whole thing is one exercise in mediocrity. But if we start now to carve out time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, this is much more than that. But let's start with 5 and 10 in the beginning of my day, at the end of my day, in the beginning of my week, at the end of my week, to look at the actions that I'm expecting to take, to review the actions that I've done. What will happen is that we'll get greater insight and greater clarity. When we get into that world of acting, doing, we'll trust that we can just act, because we'll have time to think about it later. And because we've thought about it already, and we know that this is the right thing to do, even though it feels uncomfortable. We'll talk more about this on Sunday with God's help. This is a whole world. This is how you treat yourself like a professional. You're a professional human being. Our standards have to be at the same standards as a professional player, and like a Navy SEAL, and like a commando, and like a top surgeon. Why not? Why shouldn't it be? It's been an honor to be with you this week. For those that are joining us live, thank you. For those that are watching later, thank you. You can always catch this live on Zoom, on the live streaming on the Momentum Facebook page afterwards, on my Facebook, my Instagram, my YouTube. It's an honor to be with you this week. Thanks for the time and attention. Have an amazing weekend. Don't make it good or great, make it awesome. Hope to see you on Sunday with God's help. Thanks again.